Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video we'll be taking a look at the Shadow and Pain Age of Sigmar box set and seeing how the miniatures shape up for Warcry. Here's the Shadow and Pain Age of Sigmar box set, and I'm doing something a little bit different today as I got a message on Reddit asking if I thought it was a good idea to look at the miniatures that are included in the set and seeing how we can create some Warcry warbands with them. And I thought, yeah, that's a brilliant idea, so I'm going to do that now. This set looks packed with miniatures. There's 38 in total, and so you're getting a lot of fighters potentially in this set, and it retails for £105, but I'll put a link in the description below to Element Games, and if you follow that link you can get it for a discount at just $89.95, so you're saving a huge amount there, and that's going to be an affiliate link, but it won't cost you anything extra. In fact, you're going to save that money, and for every sale made through these affiliate links, I get a small commission, and that's going to help me create loads more videos like this. So thanks so much for that support. So in this video, we're going to go through the miniatures included, and we'll start with the Daughters of Khain, and we'll go through each fighter included and see their stats and everything. And then we'll go through the Slaanesh models too, and we'll work through all their stats as well. And I'm taking all this information from two of the new Warcry supplement books, the Sentinels of Order and the Agents of Chaos, and these are packed with loads of information, and they're really great books if you can get hold of them. I've created videos for these as well, so if you want to check out what's inside the whole book, then have a look at those too. And I'll put links in the description below where you can find the books at Element Games. And again, they're going to be discounted, which is awesome. But today we're just going to focus on the Daughters of Khain and the Slaanesh. So starting with the Daughters of Khain, we've got our first miniature, and that is the MELUSAI IRONSCALE. And this is a great looking miniature. It looks really cool. And she's going to come in at 275 points. And she is a leader, so she'll be the leader for the warband that we can create from these miniatures. And so she's got the rune mark for the Daughters of Khain. She's got the leader rune mark, and then a third rune mark. So there's going to be some abilities here, and a choice of 2 weapons, and a movement is 7. She can take 32 wounds, so lots of damage can be taken there. And she's got a toughness of 4. And the choice of 2 weapons, one is a range of minimum 3, maximum 7, so you can't use this for any miniatures under 3 inches away. And 2 attack dice for this one, with a strength 3, dealing 3 to 6 on a crit. And the second weapon is like the spear, so we've got a range of 2, can deal 5 attacks, that's 5 dice can roll for that weapon, with a strength 4, dealing 2 to 4 on a crit. So 2 good weapons there, with some range, and she can certainly take a lot of wounds. But now let's go and look at the abilities that come with the Daughters of Khain and see what she gets. And she's also going to get not just the fighter abilities, but also the leader abilities. Here's the leader ability. And so for this one, she needs the leader rune mark and the Daughters of Khain rune mark. And this is a triple called Sacrifice to Khain. A fighter can use this ability only if an enemy fighter has been taken down by an attack action made by them this activation. Until the end of the battle round, add 1 to the attack's characteristic of attack actions that have a range characteristic of 3 or less made by visible friendly fighters while they are within 6 inches of this fighter. So like a lot of these abilities, that's quite a mouthful, so let's break it down. So this is a decent ability which can empower her friendly fighters around her, so she can add 1 to their attack's characteristic until the end of the battle round. But they must have a range of 3 or less, and they've got to be within 6 inches of her, and she's got to be able to see them. But there is a caveat, and she has to have made an attack and taken an enemy down in her activation. So if you want to use this kind of ability, you'll want this fighter to be activated as one of the first ones in your warband during that round, and then hope they can take an enemy fighter down, and then they can make use of this triple. I mean, there's lots of things have to line up to make this ability work, but if she gets it right and she's got lots of her fighters around her, then this could really work well and add some extra attacks against the enemy throughout the whole round. She just gets that 1 leadership ability, but she's also got the fighter abilities that are open to all the fighters who've got the Daughters of Khain rune mark, and this first one is a double called Bathe in Blood. A fighter can use this ability only if they are within 3 inches of a visible enemy fighter with 1 or more damage points allocated to them. Until the end of this fighter's activation, add 1 to the attacks and strength characteristics of attack actions made by this fighter. So this is more like it. This seems like a really powerful ability, and for a double this is great. So they've just got to be within 3 inches of a visible fighter with 1 or more damage points allocated to them. And in Warcry, with everyone getting hit all the time, there's a good chance that that's going to happen. And then until the end of their activation, they can add 1 to both the attacks and strength characteristics of their attack actions. So that's really great. And if that means they do 2 attack actions in 1 turn, then this ability is going to apply to both of those attack actions. So this is a really good ability for a double. And I think this is going to be used a lot if you want to play the Daughters of Khain. Now we're on to the third ability, and this one's a triple called Slaughter's Strength. And again, this is a fighter's ability that anyone with the Daughters of Khain rune mark can use. So Slaughter's Strength, until the end of this fighter's activation, add the value of this ability to the strength characteristic of attack actions made by this fighter that have a range characteristic of 3 or less. Nice, so this is going to be really good if you're going up against a warband that's a lot tougher than you. And so if you're rolling anything from a 3 upwards, I guess, for this ability, if the ability value is 3 or more, then you're going to be adding enough to your strength characteristic to take on most of the toughness characteristics out there. So this is a really good ability, and for a triple, seems quite high for a triple, but I think it could be quite effective. But you do have to have a range of 3 or less. So we'll see how that's going to affect other fighters in this warband, because they do tend to use range a lot of the time. So we'll find out as we go through the other fighters. But that ends the abilities for our leader. We're on to our second fighter, and this is a KHINERAL LIFETAKER. And for 165 points, this one's got a lot more movement now. Movement of 12, toughness 4, and can take 10 wounds. And she's got the faction rune mark and also the fly rune mark, and then one other rune mark that we can look at that's going to give her a special ability. And with her weapon, this one is a range of 1. She's got 4 attacks, strength 3, dealing 1 to 4 on a crit. So this is a great looking model, and I love how they've used the tail to be the part of the model that keeps her like suspended in the air. So that's a really nice touch. But for 165 points, she's not really putting out a lot of damage there. She's got 4 attacks, which is nice, but for a strength 3, 1 to 4, that's not a lot at all for a miniature with this high points value. So really, and also the wounds, 10 isn't high, but she does have a lot of movement there, and she can fly. So I'd be interested to see what this ability is going to be, and if that makes up for it and makes this worth being so high in point value. But before we do that, we'll move on to the next miniature that's very similar to this one. And that next fighter is a KHINERAL Heartrender. And this one's 175 points with movement 12, toughness 4, and 10 wounds, with the faction rune mark, the fly rune mark, and that ability rune mark. And the weapon here, this one's got a lot more range. This has got a range of 8 with only 2 attacks, strength 4, dealing 1 to 4 on a crit. Again, the miniature looks awesome, really good, but for 175 points, we've not got a lot of wounds there. Only 2 attacks, strength 4, dealing just 1 to 4 on a crit. So it's a bit stronger, but you're only getting 2 attacks with this one. But that movement 12 is going to be used a lot, really, to make up for certainly the lack of wounds to get in and out of the fighting. But let's see what this ability is, because this has got to make up these points, because 175 points is really high. And you're not going to be able to take many of these into battle with you. So let's check out the abilities for both of these 2 miniatures next. And the first ability is the double Bathe in Blood that we've already seen. So this is the one to add 1 to the attacks and strength characteristic. So these are definitely going to need to make the most of this ability. And then we've got the triple Slaughter's Strength, which we've also seen, and this is going to improve that strength characteristic, which again they're going to need to benefit for. But let's see what their specific ability is for them. And this is a quad called Death on the Wind. This fighter makes a bonus move action, then they can make a bonus attack action. In addition, add 1 to the strength characteristic of that attack action if the fighter finished the move action 6 inches or more from their starting position. Okay, another long one, so let's break it down. But this reminds me a lot of the Shrike Talons abilities from the Corvus Cabal, where they can make a bonus move action and then an attack action. But they've also got the addition with this one here, where they can add 1 to the strength characteristic so long as they finish their move action 6 inches or more from their starting position. So they definitely want to be benefiting from that +1 to their strength for sure. But they're going to have to use one of their actions to move if they want to get that. So if not, they could just do maybe 2 attack actions, then use their quad to make a bonus move and attack action. But if they want to get that +1 to the strength, then they've got to make a move, then an attack, and then make the most of this ability. So a little bit to play around with there to get that full use out of it. And it's just weighing up whether that +1 to strength is worth it. But I think it would be, because they will be moving around a lot rather than just getting toe to toe and fighting it out. Now we're on to our 4th miniature, and that is the Bloodstalker. And this one, another high value at 165 points. And this one's got a movement of 7, toughness 4, can take 20 wounds, so it can take a lot more damage now. And they come with the faction rune mark and a rune mark we haven't seen yet. And the Bloodstalker's got 2 weapons. The first one is the bow and arrow, so we've got a range, minimum range 3, maximum 20. Can make 2 attacks, strength 3, dealing 1 to 5 on a crit. And then we've also got the blade up close with a range of 1, making 2 attacks, strength 3, dealing 1 to 2 on a crit. So these are really shaping up to be like high movement values. So we've got a 7 there. So you're going to be wanting to stay away from the enemy for sure, and then use the ranged weapon as well to make the attacks. But with only 2 attacks for each weapon, both only strength 3, and you're only dealing 1 to 5 with the bow and 1 to 2 with the blade, these certainly aren't going to do a lot of damage. But with this one, you want to be using that bow to get that 5 from a crit for sure. And you want to be staying away and using the ranged weapons definitely. Set, you get a second miniature that's a Bloodstalker as well, and another great looking miniature, and the stats are going to be exactly the same, but you just get another variation on that model. So this is another great looking miniature. So far they look really good, but definitely got to use the range, and they're not dealing a lot of damage, and they're not all that tough either. So not a lot going from quite yet, but let's see what the ability is for the Bloodstalker and see how that makes up for it. Bloodstalkers, because they've got that faction rune mark, they're going to get the double Bathe in Blood ability that we've seen, and also the triple, the Slaughter Strength ability. So both of those are going to be able to use these 2 good abilities, but they get their own, which is a triple, called Heartseekers. If the next attack action made by this fighter, this activation scores 1 or more critical hits, and the target fighter is more than 3 inches away, allocate a number of damage points to that fighter equal to the value of this ability. Right, so there's lots going on here. So they have to make a critical hit, and the target fighter has to be more than 3 inches away. So they'll be using their bow and arrow for this one, and they then can allocate a number of damage points to the fighter equal to the value of this ability. So you want the ability value to be high, and you've got to get a critical hit. And now here, they're only rolling, 2 dice? So they're only making 2 attacks. So that's not a huge chance there of getting that critical hit. But, I mean, if you're going to use a triple on this, or you can choose to use the triple with your leader, you just got to weigh it up. But this seems to be quite difficult to get, I think. And you want to be making, for sure, making 2 attack actions during your turn. But it says here, only the next attack action. So maybe you can only use it on 1 attack action per activation. So we'll just have to read that and make sure that is the case. But it does sound like it is. Now we'll move on to another fighter, which is a Blood Sister. And again, this one's high at 165 points. But with a good movement of 7, toughness 4, and can take 20 wounds. And this one comes with a faction rune mark and another ability rune mark that we haven't seen yet. And this one's got a weapon, a spear. So the range is 2, can make 5 attacks. That's more like it. With a strength 3, dealing 1 to 4 on a crit. So not dealing a lot of damage again, and the strength isn't high, but this one is a bit tougher, can take 20 wounds, it's got a nice range, and can make 5 attacks, which is really good. And with that 2-inch range, so you can certainly get in there, make an attack, and be far away that she's not too engaged with any of the enemy. And if she's close enough to make the attack with her first action, then she can retreat with the second move action and potentially be out of range of any attacks from them if they decide to counter her attack. So this is looking good, but let's check out the other miniature that is also a Blood Sister. And here we go, another great pose and another awesome looking miniature. So they really do look good, and really great looking warband that you could put together from this for sure. And here's the abilities for the Blood Sisters. So again, they get the double Bathe in Blood and also the triple Slaughter's Strength, and that's because they've got the Daughters of Khain warband Rumark, and then they've got their own ability, which is a double called Turn to Crystal. Pick a visible enemy fighter within 6 inches of this fighter and roll 2 dice. For each roll of 4 to 5, allocate 1 damage point to that fighter. For each roll of 6, allocate a number of damage points to that fighter equal to the value of this ability. So for a double, this isn't bad at all, and you get to roll 2 dice for every enemy fighter within 6 inches of this fighter. So this reminds me of the ability that comes with the Immolator, but that's on a triple, and I believe he only rolls 1 dice for every visible fighter. So there's a really good chance here of them getting some extra damage dealt out, and there with a roll of 6, they can allocate the number of damage points equal to the value of this ability. So for a 5 or 6 ability value, you're going to deal some good damage there. So this is really nice for a double, and I guess this is where they're making up for that high point value per fighter now. So this is great. If like the Khainite Shadowstalkers have got a double Cursed Darts where they throw 2 dice, but if they get a 6, it just halves the distance the enemy fighter is allowed to move in their next action. Whereas with this one, they can deal some extra damage points. So this is a really good ability. So I like this one. This makes up for their points for sure, and I think you'd be using this a lot if you were playing some of these fighters. I'm just going to put together some warband ideas for a 1,000-point warband using the fighters we've gone through for the Daughters of Khain now. And you can see here we've got the leader at 275, but then it only allows for 4 other miniatures. So we don't get a lot of miniatures in this warband at all with the miniatures that are included in this set. So there are some extra fighters in the book that are lower points, more towards like 55, 65. So you'd certainly want to be including more miniatures here. If you're thinking of getting the set to build a warband for these guys, then you're not going to be able to play many at the same time. And I would just worry with their toughness and their attack characteristics being quite low, you're not going to be able to deal a lot of damage or take it. So yeah, 5 miniatures, it's not a lot at all. And you'd expect, if you're only going with 5 miniatures, for them to be pretty tough. But let's have a look at some other options. So we can have also have the leader with 4 of the same fighter, which you can see here. Or you can take the MELUSAI with 4 Blood Sisters. So whichever way you do this, you know, you're still only going to have 5 fighters in your warband. So I just imagine these going up against 3 ogres with some Noblars, and I think they're going to struggle because they're not dealing out enough damage there. So, and then also if they're going up against maybe someone like the Legions of Nagash, they're just going to be overwhelmed with fighters who are going to be able to take objectives and then also hold those objectives, hold these up. And even with their large movement and their high movement characteristic, I think they're going to struggle to get around. And as they take the skeletons out, the chances are the Necromancer would just bring them back onto the battlefield. And I think that 5 of these would struggle against something like 12 or 13 Legions of Nagash. But this sums up the whole Daughters of Khain miniatures that are included in the box. So now let's move on to the Slaanesh models. The Slaanesh models are split up into 2, into the SYBARITES and also the Demons of Slaanesh. But let's start with the SYBARITES, and we've got our Lord of Pain, who is the main man, the leader for this warband. And our Lord of Pain is coming in at 220 points. He's got a movement of 4, and toughness of 4, and he can take 25 wounds. He's got the Slaanesh rune mark, the leader rune mark, and one other ability rune mark. And his weapon, just one weapon here, and that's a range of 2, this big kind of club mace thing. And he can make 4 attacks, strength 5, dealing 3 to 5 on a crit. So certainly not as much movement as the Daughters of Khain that we've seen, but these guys are much tougher, and I guess you want to be getting up close with them, and that's going to contrast against the kind of range that the Daughters of Khain are going to use. So that's really interesting, and it's good to see here we got 4 attacks, a nice strength 5, dealing 3 to 5 on a crit, so he can really put that damage out. But now let's go on and check out the abilities that he can use as a fighter, but also as a leader. And the first ability is the Slaanesh SYBARITES leader abilities, and this is a double called Violence and Excess. A fighter can use this ability only if an enemy fighter has been taken down by an attack action made by them this activation. This fighter makes a bonus move action or a bonus attack action. Okay, so to use this ability, they have to take down an enemy during their activation, and so, but for a double and for the amount of strength and damage output this miniature fighter has got, I think that's going to be happening quite a lot. So he can then choose to make a bonus move action or a bonus attack action. So this is going to be really good if he can take out a player, or a fighter, sorry, if he can take out a fighter, then he can use this double and then get another bonus move, which will put more pressure if he can move towards another enemy fighter, or if he's close enough, he can take out another attack action. So for a double, this is really good, and I think this plays into the narrative of this fighter and the warband for sure. And this Lord of Pain has another leader ability. This time it's a triple called Paragon of Depravity. Until the end of the battle round, add the value of this ability to the strength characteristic of attack actions that have a range characteristic of 3 or less made by friendly fighters while they are within 6 inches of this fighter. So this is very similar to the ability we saw for the MELUSAI, and again you want to be activating this fighter towards the early stages of the round, and then he can add to the strength characteristics of any of his friendly fighters with a range characteristic of 3 or less, but they've got to be within 6 inches of this fighter. It doesn't say they have to be visible, but they just have to be within 6 inches. So that's pretty good. So he can really add to the strength characteristic there and making them pretty tough. And that's a triple ability, and there's no like caveat, so he doesn't have to take an enemy down or anything like that, and he gets to add the value of the ability. So even if you're rolling anything from a 2 up, I would imagine, for this warband, is going to really make that strength higher than the toughness of their opponent. So that could be a really good ability to make sure that they deal out as much damage as possible. And we're on to the Slaanesh SYBARITES fighter abilities, and this first one is a double called Unrivaled Velocity. Add half the value of this ability, rounding up, to the move characteristic of this fighter for the next move action they make this activation. Okay, so this is cool. So if they've only got a movement of 4, they can add half the value of the ability rounded up. So 5 or 6, they can add 3, and then that's going to get them up to a range of 7, which is really nice. But they can only do it for the next move action they make. So they can't do it for 2 move actions during an activation, only for the next move action they make. But I think this is a really good ability that's going to allow them to chase after, certainly if they're playing against the Daughters of Khain, they can chase after them and close down that superior range they have. So that's really nice for a double there. And this is going to apply to all the fighters with the Slaanesh rune mark. So that's really good. Now we're on to the second fighter for the Slaanesh SYBARITES, and that's the HELLSTRIDER with HELLSCOURGE. And he's coming in at 145 points with a movement 10, toughness 4, and can take 20 wounds. And he's got the rune mark for the Slaanesh SYBARITES and also the mounted rune mark. So no special abilities here. And the weapon, this flail weapon, is a range of 3, can make 4 attacks, strength 3, dealing 1 to 3 on a crit. Okay, so here we got a nice range, can take a serious amount of damage as well, which is nice, with 20 wounds there. And with that nice 3 inch of range weapon as well on top of the movement, can make 4 attacks, but only strength 3, and only dealing 1 to 3 on a crit. So this is where you really want to be using that ability from the leader to empower this one. But they've got to be within 6 inches. So if you're using this 10-inch range to flick around the battlefield, they're pretty much going to be far away from the leader, I would imagine. So it'd be interesting to see how that would play out. But we've got another version of this miniature as well. So let's take a look at that model. There we go. So this model is a different variation, but exactly the same fighter with all the same stats, except this model's got a banner. So if you wanted to use the banner, which looks quite cool actually, I wouldn't normally put a banner on a fighter in a Warcry warband, but I think this one looks good, so it might look quite nice to have this. But now let's look at the abilities for the HELLSTRIDER. And so here we're just seeing that one fighter ability, which is the double unrivaled velocity, and so that's all they're going to get. They've got no other rune marks apart from the mount rune mark, and that's not, the mount rune mark's not going to give them any extra abilities, so they just get this one fighter ability on the double. In this set we get some HELLSTRIDERs which we can equip with claw spears, and here's one version of that miniature, but there's also another, this one here, and they're both exactly the same fighter. So for 145 points they're going to get a movement of 10, toughness 4 with 20 wounds, so a good amount of damage they can take. They've got the faction rune mark, the mount rune mark, and they've got an ability rune mark, so one we haven't seen yet. And for their weapon, this one's got a range of 2, can make 3 attacks, strength 3, dealing 1 to 4 on a crit. So again, nice amount of movement, can take some serious damage. They get an extra ability, which is good, but they're only 3 attacks, strength 3, dealing 1 to 4 on a crit. Not great, and so they're going to really need that ability to empower them from the leader. But again, these are a range of 10. They're going to be far away from him potentially, so be interested to see how that plays out. But otherwise, I think if you compare this against the fly-in ones from the Daughters of Khain, these ones are a lot tougher, so they can certainly take more damage. So it'd be really interesting to see these two warbands going up against each other. And these are a little bit lower as well at 145 points. But ability-wise, they get that double unrivaled velocity as a fighter with the faction rune mark. And now they've also got their own, which is a triple called Impaling Strike. Until the end of this fighter's activation, the next time this fighter finishes a move action within 1 inch of an enemy fighter, pick a visible enemy fighter within 1 inch of this fighter. Then allocate a number of damage points to that fighter equal to the value of this ability. It looks like this one can only be used once. It says the next time this fighter finishes a move action. And they've got to finish that action within 1 inch of an enemy fighter, and then they can simply allocate a number of damage points to that enemy fighter equal to the value of the ability. So if they've got 555s or 666s here, and they just have to get within 1 inch of the enemy, and then they can deal out a decent amount of damage there. So that's pretty good. But with that range of 10, do you want them that close to the enemy? I'm not sure. But they do have 20 wounds, so they could sustain some attacks and stay kind of toe-to-toe to use this on the next round, perhaps. So yeah, this could be a really good ability for them, and it's a triple that's unique to those fighters. Now we're moving on to the Demons of Slaanesh, and these are a different warband with a different faction rune mark. So it doesn't include the Lord of Pain either in this warband, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be an issue for you to take these Daemonettes and bring them across to the other warband and kind of mix and match them. I don't think that would be a problem. I mean, you get some extra abilities which might overpower them a little bit, but I think you could do it. So let's take a look at the Daemonette, and we're going to get 2 miniatures that are exactly the same fighter, just variations of the model. And here's the first one. This looks great with these weird kind of claws. That's awesome. And here's the second one that carrying a banner. And again, the banner looks really good. So I really like the banners that come with this warband here. And for 75 points, we get a lower fighter, which is good. And we've got that Demons of Slaanesh rune mark and an ability rune mark. And the Daemonette has got a movement of 5, toughness 3, with 10 wounds. And with the weapon, it's up close, so 1 inch range, making 4 attacks, strength 3, dealing 1 to 4 on a crit. So this is pretty decent for a 75 point fighter. Got a range of 5, toughness 3, and can take 10 wounds, that's normal, and 4 attacks, strength 3, dealing 1 to 4 on the crit. That's pretty good as well. But let's see what the abilities are going to be for all the demons of Slaanesh, and especially the one that's unique to the Daemonettes. So here's our first ability. This is a double, and this is for a fighter ability called Lithe and Swift. Add half the value of this ability, rounding up to the move characteristic of this fighter for the next move action they make this activation. So another one to increase that move characteristic there. And again, it's just for the next move action they make during an activation, not for both. So, but for a double, to get that extra movement, that's pretty nice. And that's going to get them close enough to perhaps make an attack with their next action. So that could be a really useful ability. And for a double, that's pretty good. So let's move on to their second one. And this is unique to the Demons of Slaanesh. Let's check that out now for the Daemonettes. And this one's another double called Sadistic Killers. Add 1 to the damage points allocated by each hit and critical hit from attack actions made by this fighter, this activation that have a range characteristic of 3 or less. Okay, so this is cool. So they can add it to, if they make 2 attack actions, then they can use this ability for both of those, and they can add 1 to damage points allocated by each hit and critical hit. So as long as they get a hit of some kind, they can add an extra 1 damage point. So that's really good for each one too, for each hit. So this is a really good ability for a double. And if you're playing a lot of these and you can get a few doubles, 2 or 3 doubles, then this is going to be a really nice one to use up. And this could be really effective. That's all the fighters that are included in the box set. And so we've got a lot more options here when we're building our warbands with the Slaanesh models. So we've got the Lord of Pain as the leader at 220. And then we've got 780 points to kind of mix and match with. And so I'll go through a few options here of how we could do that. And the first one, we could take 6 of the Daemonettes and then 2 of the mounted ones there. So, you know, you can have 9 miniatures with some potential longer range, but all pretty tough. And using those abilities could work out really well. And this brings us to a total of 960 points for the warband. Next one, you could take the Lord of Pain and then take 5 of the mounted claw spears. And that's going to give you a totally different warband to play. But I don't think doing that would be a great idea, because you wouldn't be able to use that triple ability of the Lord of Pain much, I don't think. Because these ones are going to probably be out of that 6-inch range. But we've got loads more options. So we've got another one at 950 points. And this is Lord of Pain with 2 Daemonettes and 4 of the mounted ones, the spear or the flail weapon. So that's perhaps a good one to try. But with 2 Daemonettes, I don't know if they'd be that effective really. You're almost swapping a claw spear for 2 Daemonettes. But another option is to take the Lord of Pain with 10 Daemonettes. So that might be quite fun, but a bit monotonous maybe because they're all the same. And so there's not much variety there in that. And you'd probably be looking to bring in some other fighters that you could use and use some other fighter cards from the warbands to make it more interesting. And there we go. That brings us to the end now. That's all the miniatures that we've gone through for both the Daughters of Khain and the Slaanesh. And so that should give you an idea of what you can do with them, how many points, their abilities and all that. So I hope this has been helpful. There is one miniature that came in the box set that I didn't include, and that's that kind of chariot looking model, and that you wouldn't be able to use that in Warcry for sure. But I guess you could just, if you were just buying this set for Warcry, you could sell that sprue on eBay or whatever and make a bit of money back, and then perhaps get 2 warbands for maybe even under £80, £40 each. But really you've just got to weigh up whether this is enough for a warband for you. For me, the Daughters of Khain, only taking 5 of these miniatures into a warband, I don't think it would be enough. I don't think they're like tough enough or could take enough damage to withstand it. And I really think they'd come up against some of the other warbands, even with 9 or 10 fighters, but especially against someone like the Legions of Nagash with 12, they're really going to struggle to hold objectives. And with their tactics, it seems like they've got to use that range to move around a lot. And if they're doing that, they're just not going to get the objectives. And I'm sure they could hold up the enemy and cause trouble. But when you're playing Warcry, you want to be playing the game, not the enemy so much. So you want to be getting those objectives. So there are some limitations here. But I think you could definitely add in some other fighters and some lower point fighters that are included in the Agents of Chaos Warcry book. and then that would give you a more rounded warband with some extra miniatures. And just choose these, they almost come across as kind of your favoured like champions, if you like, rather than your lower point ones. So you definitely, I think, need some lower point ones to bulk it out, and then those lower point ones could hold the objectives, while the ones with the range could shoot around and use their range weapons as well to back them up, almost like an artillery kind of tactic. And I think that would work really well then. But as it stands, just with this box set, I don't think there's enough in it to warrant buying it if you were looking for the Daughters of Khain. But what you do get with the Daughters of Khain is a ton of points. So I've worked out you could get potentially 2,800 points for Warcry here. So if you had even 2 other friends who wanted to split some of these, you could divide these up into 3. Only one of you would get MELUSAI though as the leader, but you know, you could split them up and you could potentially have almost 3 warbands from this points wise. So it's a lot of points. You could even take some out and sell them, but it's a lot of hassle. And I think they must bring out a Daughters of Khain Warcry warband specifically for them. So if it was me, I think I'd hang on and wait for that. Right, so now the Slaanesh, the SYBARITES and the Demons. So here you're going to have to combine those 2 warbands and the abilities. So whether that's something you could do in match play, I don't know. But if you're playing at home and it wasn't serious, then yeah, for sure, mix it up. That wouldn't be a problem. Points wise, you're going to get a total of 2,400 here. So that's quite a lot of points. Again, you're going to get over 2 warbands, and certainly that's plenty for you to even expand into campaigns and things like that. And it's just, again, these ones have got more variety than the Daughters of Khain. You can certainly field even up to 11 if you go all Daemonettes with that Lord of Pain. You can have 11 fighters in your warband, but they would all be the same except for the leader. So if you want the variety, you can get a little bit of it by using those HELLSTRIDERs with either the spear or the HELLSCOURGE. So you've got some choice with these that you didn't necessarily have with the Daughters of Khain. And you've also got that mix of lower points with mid-range up to the Lord of Pain too. So these ones, I think there's definitely some options here if you wanted to get the Slaanesh miniatures as a warband. And maybe you've got a friend who collects Daughters of Khain for regular Age of Sigmar, and then perhaps you can split a set with them, or just get it and sell half of it on eBay. But to be fair, you could probably pick up a Slaanesh start collecting set and get everything you need without the hassle of having to do that. So it's up to you really. I guess for me, Slaanesh looks good as a warband from this. Daughters of Khain certainly needs bulking out, but all great looking miniatures. And I think they'd be nice to have and paint. And you could add even the Daughters of Khain maybe to your Khainite Shadowstalkers warband as heroes and extra kind of fighters in it, doing it that way. So there's a few options like that. So what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, this video's gone on a lot longer than I thought it would. There was quite a lot of fighters there and 2 warbands to cover. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about using this for Warcry? Is it something you would pick up? Would you look to split it? Do you prefer the Slaanesh against the Daughters of Khain? Which one's your favourite? Be great to hear your thoughts. I'll put links again to everything that we've gone through in the description below, and there'll be links to Element Games so you can make some great savings there. And thanks so much for watching. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.